All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining this afternoon's session with LinkedIn. Before we get started, we'll just run through a couple brief housekeeping items for the session today. First of all, this session is getting recorded, so we will be looking to provide the recordings for these sessions to all attendees by sometime next week and have that available for you. All attendees are on mute and off camera, just as an FYI, but we do encourage you and invite you to participate in the chat function throughout the session presentation today to participate in the dialogue in any way you'd like, as well as if you do have a question for either of our presenters today from LinkedIn that you would be hoping that we could ask of them and get their opinions and answers on. Go ahead and use the Q&A function. We'll be reserving time at the end of their presentation to hopefully get to as many of those questions that come up as possible. So again, feel free to use the Q&A function for that. If you do need any help, we do have people monitoring both the chat and the Q&A rooms. If there's any issues you experience or anything that you need, please certainly post in there, but you can also email us at marketing@carnegiehighered.com if you need anything from us. Of course, we encourage you to be social as you're participating in the Connection Conference throughout this week. So please use the hashtag #TheConnection and tag us at Carnegie, which is at Carnegie HQ in doing so. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next session and our next speakers. We have our friends and partners from LinkedIn. Carnegie's been doing a lot of work with LinkedIn over the years on behalf of so many of the university partners that we work with as well, and have really enjoyed that partnership and the work that we've done together. They are presenting on From Interest to Enrollment, How to Win with Creative. And so I'm excited to introduce Tim McCarthy, Senior Account Executive at LinkedIn, and Richie Monsart, Senior Client Solutions Manager at LinkedIn. So with that, I will toss it over to you both and take it from there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. As Mark said, we've been supporting partners of Carnegie's in terms of their activity on the platform on behalf of their partners for many years now. So we're really happy to be here. So again, thank you to Mark and the whole Carnegie team. They're really, for my money, the best in the business, and never less than a pleasure to work with, and always really smart in their approach. So we're always happy and honored to be a part of these sorts of things with them. Richie and I are on the education team within Marketing Solutions at LinkedIn. And a lot of what we do is supporting Carnegie and their efforts on the platform. But we as a team are really focused on education in all its forms. It's been a growing team, a fast growing team within LinkedIn. And I think we're both really excited to be at the point where the platform is really coming into its own as an enrollment engine. And we really have the tactics and the best practices and the strategy behind that now to really make it successful for a broader swath of our partners that we work with. So we're happy to be with you today. We thank you for spending part of your day with us. It's really important for us to be able to hear from you. And in that spirit, what we have to share today in terms of slides is about half an hour of a presentation that Richie and I will share, leaving about 15 minutes at the end to cover any sorry, I just saw a comment about Elms College, which is my hometown. So thank you for being here. But we want to leave it open and kind of leave it conversational. So any questions that you have, however tactical, however broad, however high level, please, use this opportunity. We'd love to talk. We'd love to hear from you as we go as well. So we're here to talk about creative, and we'll talk about creative best practices, certainly. We'll talk about a lot of little tactical pieces that can help you stand out in a crowded field, in a competitive field, in a rapidly changing field. But we'll also talk pretty deliberately and pretty extensively about the context for that creative in terms of, are we setting the right expectations? When we ask for information, is that an equitable exchange of information? Is the right time to ask for that information? Does your audience really understand that you're talking to them? Do your prospects understand what the value of a program is to them? So we'll talk kind of in both ways, best practices in general that you can use across the creative suite on LinkedIn. We're a little more focused on content here, but these best practices can be used kind of across the suite. And also just setting it in that context of what we see really drive enrollment at the end of the day. So in terms of agenda, this is what we're looking at today. We'll talk a little bit about the anatomy of compelling creative in terms of kind of how the pieces fit together and what works best as far as that goes. We'll talk a little bit about copy and messaging, how to position a program, how to position an institution, what kinds of information tend to get good engagement, what kinds of information tend to get people to convert and actually come down the funnel to be enrolled students for you. We'll share a couple things that are highlights of the product roadmap. It's been a very, very busy few years, and that continues. There's a couple of products coming that we're really, really excited about that I think you'll benefit from, and we'll also benefit from the creative best practices again that we'll share today. And then we'll leave you with some key takeaways and hopefully plenty of time for some Q&A. So keep the questions coming. So before we start, as I said, most of this will kind of get into the nuts and bolts of creative, but I wanted to kind of set the stage in terms of making sure that we're aligning our messaging with the student decision-making process. A lot of times the consultation we do across higher education as a team, a lot of times we're talking about, yes, we can capture leads efficiently. We can capture that moment in time, that expression of interest. But if we can put it in a framework that kind of aligns better with student decision making, and we can be there at those points where people are engaging and get them the right next step for that decision making process, then we're going to have an easier time at the end of the day, from a marketing perspective, certainly, but also from an enrollment perspective, from an admissions perspective, getting prospects who have more information, who have more intent. And when I alluded earlier to the platform getting to the point where there's a sophistication to the way we're able to approach this, I think these are some examples of how to think about that I wanted to share today. Any awareness that you can do as an institution for your institutional point of view, your faculty, your rankings, any kind of thought leadership you can put out there. If faculty are publishing and you can share that information, share a chapter of a book with prospects for the program they teach, that's all great stuff that really helps you establish who you are. And again, kind of sets up that equitable value exchange where you can then ask for personal information from them and they feel a little more comfortable knowing a little bit more about you. And then obviously we want to share program value, specific skills that are gained by a specific program, the benefit to the prospect's career. We don't want to lose sight of lead generation, certainly. Use lead gen forms on platform for conversion or push your optimized landing page, whatever that is. Obviously that's going to be the core of what we do on the platform, that program specific kind of exposure. But we also want to do things like maximize the retargeting that we're doing. We've rolled out additional ways to retarget. All day long, we advise everyone that we work with, maximize the retargeting you do as much as possible. Those people are interested, they're just not quite there yet. So again, have that point of engagement available to them so that they can see that, they can engage with it, they can move on to the next appropriate step further down the funnel. And finally, enrollment. I think this is probably the most underutilized tactic, and one of the ones we've seen have the most outsized effect. So we encourage all the partners that we work with to not kind of stop at lead generation and move that over to an email channel exclusively. If we can upload leads or use a lead audience to actually drive prospects to directly apply, to attend an info session, to talk to someone in admissions, we've seen that had a huge effect where several $100s to cover a few thousand leads directly results in 10 or 15 or 20 additional enrollments. So just to note before we start, again, creative is really important, but having creative that matches the decision-making process is equally important. And if you have distinct creative for each stage, that's fantastic, that's best. But if not, really the structure is more important than anything. Okay, so let's talk about the anatomy of compelling creative. Move to the next slide. This I thought was interesting to share. This comes from a Nielsen study, obviously in a discussion about creativity and creativity is important. Yes, of course it is. So I wanted to highlight that, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about creative in the ways that it can help you kind of make an outsized impact or kind of cover some of these other areas in this wheel here that we might not necessarily think about. So we'll talk a lot in this presentation about consistent visual language, the things that you can do with your creative that'll establish your brand, establish your name, and continue kind of create a through line visually to have that impact people. So the point here being, yes, you should be doing awareness and branding. What creative can do in part, if it's strong and it kind of hits those notes, is help you with that. Help make sure that your name, that your logo, that your colors, that your ideas really resonate in a bigger way. Reach is something. If you have great creative, it's going to get more organic engagement. It's going to do better on the platform. Your paid marketing is going to do better and go farther. So having a really strong creative element to your campaigns will actually improve your reach. We talk about targeting a lot, and with good reason. We have the best first-party professional data set in the world all day long. Absolutely. But having creative that really calls out the value to the prospect, to the member, that really calls out who you're talking to, that really gives them a compelling reason to click through and to take action, that can be just as important in performance as targeting can be. And lastly, I'll just say recency. Obviously, this is a factor of, people having your message and your image in mind for a longer period of time. And again, that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of creativity. Being able to construct content that hits those levers and is creative for its own sake because it does better, but also helps with all these other factors as well, which can be especially helpful if you don't have a huge budget on the platform. Creativity can be the single thing that you can do to really stand out from the field.
So here are the essential elements of the anatomy of compelling creative. So at every stage of the student decision-making process, you need to ensure that your creative cuts through the noise and provides not only substance, but value to your prospects. So imagery is the first and most critical element of what we use as sponsored content within the feed. And it's where your prospects are first going to be naturally drawn to. So I would spend, and with your creative team, spend the most time and resources here. As Tim was mentioning, this can be the critical factor in generating as much engagement and interest in your institution and programs as possible. But not only that, your copy must also succinctly provide value. Within LinkedIn, I would say brevity is king, as you only have a couple of seconds to hold prospects' attention. And then in and outside of higher ed, prospects now expect a cohesive and seamless experience from their first to the last touch point within their decision-making process with your brand. So make sure that your content is as seamless and follows the same guidelines as much as possible and follows that prospect expectation. And it's always good to have a testing mindset. So when we're going through campaigns, it's always best to look and change one variable at a time and let the data reveal what's most compelling in terms of imagery, messaging, things of your value propositions, what's most compelling to your specific audience.
Thanks, Richie. Excuse me. And going back for a moment into that place of the context, also wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how to engage with prospects in that equitable exchange of information. So we know, you can put yourself in these shoes in a million different ways in any kind of experience with some product or service or opportunity that you're looking to get information for. If people are too aggressive, then it may turn you off and you may not actually pursue it. So prospects, I think, at root need to feel trust and they need to feel comfortable with you before they'll show information. So this is another huge one that we see all the time, and I understand it. It can be tough to kind of gauge what the right balance of information is, what the right exchange is. There may be things that you need for informational purposes that may not be aligned with what where the prospect is or wants to give up, their phone number, their birth date, their zip code. So really what we want to do, and there's no exact one right answer for this, but I think we want to keep these things in mind. Are we asking for too much? The typical one is, you want a brochure? Well, we need your phone number. And I think a lot of prospects think, well, why do you need my phone number? Can I just have the brochure? I don't even know what the program is yet. So things like that are good to keep in mind. We'll share some examples outside of education in terms of being able to offer something of value before you ask for information. That's where we talk about awareness and branding. And if there's anything you can give them, that'll be a value that you can share before you ask for anything. If you ask too soon, we're big fans of letting prospects look at ungated program information information and getting a whole bunch of it and then retargeting them from there with a lead form. So it's super easy for them to convert, but we know that they have a ton of information on the program first, or asking for the wrong things, asking for unnecessary info. We also see this like it might be first touch with a prospect and there's 4 different concentrations for a program. And part of the lead collection process is to identify which of those concentrations you're interested in. That probably doesn't align with where that particular prospect is and probably can't make an informed decision. So if you don't need as much information as you're asking for, or if you can possibly get that information from the prospect later in the process and just get that interest in the door, that's kind of, I think, the trend we're seeing more and more is to try to kind of control the amount of information you're asking for and really just try to get them in the process of talking to you before you ask for too much.
So going back to that first element of compelling creative, imagery is king. So when we're talking about sponsored content in particular, you can't exactly just rely on your institution's name or their logo, especially if you have, good rankings or national renown. Because sponsored content, your eye is naturally drawn to the image unit first. We have to ensure that you're leveraging your brand elements throughout it. So using your school name, your logo, your crest, and especially your colors to stand out in the feed. So a good rule of thumb is whenever you're developing new sponsored content creative is to literally take your thumb, cover up your logo and your school name, and try to discern if you can discern the ads coming from your institution. We definitely want to make sure that we're not presenting a very generic either school campus image, a gathering in a classroom, like a business school setting. Use what you've got. Any sorts of colors or text overlays. There's no limit to the amount of text overlay you can put into sponsored content. So use as much as possible. That can be the key differentiator and the thing that actually makes prospects stop in the feed and focus on your ad specifically.
A little bit more about the image itself. I think this is a fun little example of what we're talking about here, and it is a big factor. It's what stops the scroll. It's what gets people's attention. It's the easiest way to transmit your most important details to the prospect. It's absolutely that. But I also want to say, in addition to it being a best practice and performing really well and being kind of just part of the core experience on the platform now. Obviously a couple of years ago when we had to pivot to, oh my God, are we going to be in person? Are we not going to be in person? What do we show? What do we portray? Do we portray a classroom in the traditional sense or do we not? And then how do we actually line up the assets and execute on the assets and get them into market in a time where it can actually make a difference. And I think we saw a lot of that a couple of years ago where it was kind of a little bit of paralysis, which is totally understandable, but also like, what do we replace it with? Do we have the flexibility to really move on the fly and change things up? And I think that's something that, as an industry can be tough. There can be understandably a lot of brand guidelines. There can be a lot of control over creative. There can be a lot of specifics about that. But if we are able to kind of think in this visual way and kind of get some buy-in on this as an idea, it also allows you to pivot more quickly. It allows you to kind of change your messaging. It allows you also to be a little bit kind of more authentic. I think this sort of stuff is not something that another school can easily reproduce. It's something that stands out. It's not going to cause the fatigue that a stock photo will. So just a little bit more about that in terms of just operationally, if you all can kind of make a move in this direction or think about this, it also gives you more flexibility to pivot as you need to pivot for new circumstances that come up.
And with the previous slide and this slide, we're presenting some sponsored content within the mobile aspect here, and that's intentional. We live in a mobile first world, so your content absolutely needs to be legible on a tinier screen format. Internal data shows that over 80% of sponsored content is viewed on the LinkedIn mobile app. So this is a great, kind of use case to make sure that you're using larger text overlays as pictured on the left for AWS and really big and bold visuals to make it stand out, especially on mobile devices. It's not a good use of trying to overly stimulate or put, very complicated infographics as pictured on the right with that Salesforce example. So when you're developing new creative, you may start on your desktop, but definitely make sure to preview on the mobile device and make sure that it's as easy and legible for prospects to view.
Thank you, Richie. Yeah, we want to show a little bit of a couple things here. One, in terms of aspect ratios, there's been some updates on the platform, but also show some of this this thinking in action. So on the left, these are both obviously examples of creative from Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a close partner of Carnegie's and thus of ours. So this is again kind of some of the work that we advise on in action. So we moved from a horizontal aspect ratio on the left to a square one on the right. There's also a vertical aspect ratio as well. And this also incorporates, as you can see, the colors. It's very clean. It has some very, very strong value propositions that pop a little better on the right than they do on the left. And so this itself resulted in a huge change. And I think what's kind of interesting about this is that yes, CTR went up, but there was an outsized effect in terms of lead volume, a huge decrease in CPL, a big increase to the lead form completion rate. Again, so like these sorts of things can kind of get people more excited. It can be more digestible. And I think the evidence is there in this case and others that when people actually engage, they retain this information, and that creativity makes more of an impact than the previous version did.
And thus far, we've exclusively shown sponsored content single image ads, so in both horizontal, square, and vertical aspect ratios. But something else to consider is using and leveraging sponsored content video ads. So we've seen a lot of institutional partners, and we've recommended to them taking some of their testimonial videos or more consideration or awareness assets that they have on their website and placing that more in a retargeting or lead nurture aspect. So making sure that there's a 30-second long, maybe minute plus video where we've already kind of determined that the audience that they're going after has shown interest in the institution, the program, and is more willing to sit through a longer video format and get more information that way. One thing to consider, and this is not something widely leveraged within the EDU vertical, is using really short video ads, somewhere around the lines of anywhere from 3 to 10 seconds long, that closely replicates a looping GIF file, just to take advantage of how our brains are wired. So we're more willing to focus on movement, even just short movements versus just static content. So this can also be a key differentiator for your institution and help you stand out, because there's honestly not a lot of educational partners that are making use of this. You can see on the right here, all the examples here are outside of education, mostly in tech.
Yeah, and I wanted to share these examples from Salesforce. And I hope you all don't mind lots of examples from outside education. I feel like we all see a lot within education, and sometimes it's a little more inspiring or a little just, the remove of having it not be education kind of helps some of it pop a little more. But anyway, I love this example, and I wanted to share it for a couple of reasons. One, you can see here as well, very consistent visual language. The mascot shows up all the time, and many of you have mascots, so maybe mascots should start making an appearance. I don't know. But the visual language is very consistent. You can see in terms of the layout of the text, the value proposition is very clear, that sort of thing. So sure, I mean, design-wise and resource-wise, Salesforce has a lot of resources, but these lessons in terms of just visually keeping these things in mind and consistent is something I think is attainable for anyone. And the other thing is Salesforce also has an appetite for the full funnel approach and an acknowledgement that a lot of the people that who are going to be their customers are not necessarily a market now. And that, along with, they're very happy to share content marketing that's specific to sales professionals or to different buying groups. And they put this stuff out there as kind of the first stage of engagement with them and what they have to offer. So again, that value exchange, if you can offer something of value to your prospects before you take too much information from them, and use it in a format like this, it should do well for you.
So we're going to shift gears a bit. We've talked all this time about how important your visuals are to getting prospects to stop and engage with your content, but we don't want to leave the impression that your copy is, an aside or is completely useless. It still plays a very critical role in providing additional color and information to your prospects about your institution and programs. So one initial thing to think about is definitely your character count. Again, brevity is king here. So we suggest with sponsored content particularly to stay within about 70 characters in the intro text. And this is for a few reasons. Number one, it forces you to say your most important and pertinent value propositions and what makes you valuable and differentiated with your story as early as possible. So get to the point, no fluff whatsoever. And number two, especially on mobile devices, your text will get truncated after approximately 100 characters. So if you have, over 100 characters, you may have a see more button appear, and that will require a prospect to click on that to get the full copy. So we can see here on the right that Purdue University Global clearly demonstrates the benefits of having short, clear and concise text across both organic posts and paid.
Yeah, and a little more here on leading with the why. Obviously, all this stuff that we're sharing, we're trying to build relevancy to the member. We're trying to make it explicit what skills they're going to gain, how it's going to help their career, how it's going to help them in life, how it's whatever the details. So we want to talk about things like offer insights, talk about the end benefits, all that sort of thing. But I think it's also I think it's good to mention at this point also that I think often what we say and often what we talk about when the question comes to us, okay, we want to differentiate ourselves. We want to say things that nobody else can say. We want to talk about outcomes nobody else can talk about. But sometimes it's an MBA and it's hard to do that. So I wanted to just kind of make the point in practical terms. It's almost, I think a lot of it is trying to have the mindset that you're not trying to share a headline. You're not trying to set something up. It's not a billboard. It's not something where you want people to sort of be interested and be curious and then click through and hopefully they find the really good stuff that really engages them. What we want everyone to do and what does best on the platform is you're in a place where people are offering specific advice. You're offering particular specific opportunities. You're talking about gaining specific skills you've learned or skills you want to learn. The more that you can talk in those terms, the better you're going to have, the better time you're going to have, and the more it's going to resonate within the feed, and the better engagement it's going to get, all that sort of stuff. So from a practical standpoint, if you do have an MBA and it's tough to maybe get that into a little capsule of copy that really differentiates yourself from everybody else who's offering an MBA. But what I would suggest is what we do all the time is download, go to your brochures, go to your email marketing, go to any kind of materials that have been built out already, and don't wait for those. Pull those out front. If you 9.5 times out of 10, we can look at a piece of creative and it's like, well, as Richie said, you can put your thumb over it and you're not really sure what school will come over. But if you go to a landing page and you go to a brochure, there's almost always copy that if it's not differentiated in terms of the specifics of the program, it's at least put in a compelling way. It's been written in a way that's engaging, that tries to speak to who the program is for. So that would be my note there. If you're struggling with this and kind of how to present differentiation, go to the existing assets you already have. It's all approved copy usually. Use that and try to use that for inspiration in terms of how you position the program.
And to just build off of what Tim said, it's all about leading with value. There's various ways in which you can do this. We oftentimes find that with sponsored content, creative in particular, the messaging tends to be more of a reinforcement of the sales pitch rather than maybe speaking to actual pain points, speaking to the actual nature of our platform as a professional network, that people are connecting with institutions, with their network, with trying to figure out, their next step within their career or educational journey. So I just wanted to showcase these two examples from WGU because I feel like they do a really good job of really finding the shortest way to clearly articulate why somebody should care about them as an institution and their programs, and really speaking to them in human terms. It's oftentimes easy to rely back on more of the sales pitch of, we have this MBA, we have, you can complete in XYZ number of months. But if you can kind of weave together a story, or, at least pique some interest, ask a question up front, deliver it in a more human fashion, then it's going to pay dividends for you as well.
Yeah, and I think I would just add very quickly to that there's so much in the first post, there's so much emotionally behind it, and there's so much in terms of motivation and what you want for your family and for your, there's so much of that in there that it's really, really resonant. And in the second example, like the whole how things are shaping up in terms of degrees versus certifications, like that's a whole huge set of potential objections that people may have, or just confusion on which one is the right thing for them. So that actually gets to a thing that's probably a huge factor for a huge number of prospects, calls out the people who might be wondering about that, the one versus the other, and also telegraphs that it's really important to them, that they are at the forefront of it, that they're thinking about this, they know the certifications are important, and they're providing flexible ways for people to get the opportunity that they want. So again, it's just trying to think a little bit behind the headline and think about those motivating factors that are going to really move people. Sorry, Richie, go ahead. Do you want to? Yeah. I won't spend a ton of time on this. Again, it's really just about that exchange of information. If you don't need to have 14 fields to complete to get a brochure, that we absolutely recommend that you kind of pare that down to what you absolutely need as much as possible. Try to get the lead so that they're informed. Use retargeting. Give them program information, but really just try to capture what you absolutely need at that moment to make it a viable conversation for yourself.
So I hope to answer a question in the chat here as well that may be related to this. There was a question about that Notre Dame example of using the learn more call to action, saying it's direct, but it's not as effective or distinct. So what's our opinion about dynamic call to action language? I think expectation setting here is extremely important for whatever, kind of funnel position you're at for your campaigns. So really aligning your copy and your call to actions together and doing the work for the prospect before they have to kind of potentially navigate some language that may not kind of be congruent with what the expectation is for that particular promotion of your institution or program. So there are certain words and call to actions that may signal a shorter time investment than others. And there's some others that you may want to assume that will take a longer engagement period that may be a better fit for or a targeting aspect or lead nurture aspect, where we've already known that these prospects have taken some step, raised their hands, and shown some intent with your school or university. So I would say, just generally speaking, shorter time commitments, more so for awareness and consideration stage, like before a lead capture, and then longer time investments for targeting and lead nurture efforts. But make sure that whatever your objective and whatever you're kind of providing of equal value to the prospect aligns with your upfront copy and the call to action button as well. So learn more is always a go-to. It is generic, but it kind of fits within that pre-lead gen kind of stage. But definitely consider these other options for all the other stages of the funnel as well.
And another example that I think will close out this part of things in terms of calling out the audience. You can see an example here, and I think there's one more. There you go, animation in terms of conversion. So calling out the audience is a huge one, and it's really easy to do. Would absolutely recommend that you do that. It can be as simple as, "Hey, marketers." That definitely deserves one place in your creative rotation, I think. And if you don't. have this defined an audience. If you're talking, again, we can go back to the MBA conversation and what might be the appropriate audience to call out there. I would point you back to the Western Governors example of the kind of student testimonial. That's also something that if you can't appeal directly to the audience by name, appeal to their aspirations, talk about working professionals, talk about, what that prospects will come to you, try to meet those objections, try to call those people out, even if you have to move to kind of whatever their aspirations are or their specific skills they want to learn. Specificity, again, is really important, and this kind of thing will help a lot.
All right, so we're going to shift gears into our product roadmap, really focused on the early parts of the summer. So think mid-July to early August. But as Tim mentioned at the top, there are 2 products that we wanted to walk through with you all that should be a kind of a good fit to kind of further demonstrate the points that we've made here about creating compelling creative. So some of these products you'll kind of see have direct ties to what we've talked about with sponsored content, but have their own kind of unique value propositions that we feel are going to be especially productive and efficient for education marketers in particular. So the first here is called click-to-message ads. I like to kind of refer to this as the marriage between sponsored content and conversation ads. There may be some people on the call that are already familiar with our messaging ad formats and suites. We have sponsored messaging and conversation ads. Before I kind of dive into what click-to-message ads are, for those that don't know what a conversation ad is, it is essentially a decision tree messaging format where a prospect receives a message in their LinkedIn inbox from your institution or a particular custom sender. It could be a faculty member, admissions counselor, a dean, anyone of renown from your institution. And they'll present the prospect with a few different options and say, hey, I'm the dean from XYZ University. We thought you'd be a good fit for this program. If you want to learn more, click the available options below. So for the conversation ads, you have the ability to add up to 5 call to action buttons for every message thread. So it is a bit of a kind of a choose your own adventure or path kind of a flow that the prospect will navigate to. So you can add a lead gen form, send prospects to a website, to the program information page, or they can click and get another message directly from that sender to learn more about the program directly within LinkedIn. So that's the quick and dirty of conversation ads. Click-to-message ads essentially will have sponsored content up front. So a member will be in the newsfeed. They'll see content like that pictured on the right. But instead of having a learn more or apply call to action, they'll be presented with this start chat option. So instead of having a lead gen form pop up or having the prospect be directed to your program landing page, they'll be automatically directed to the LinkedIn inbox, where they'll essentially follow a conversation ad flow directly from there. This will operate as under the same auction dynamics as sponsored content. So this will be a cost per click or cost per 1,000 impression model versus our other messaging formats that operate on a cost per send. The nice thing about this is there is no 30-day frequency cap. So we should have a lot of available inventory that we've oftentimes found, have some difficulties with sponsored messaging and conversation ads with those products. So if you're interested in this, I would reach out to your Carnegie team reps, and we can then connect and kind of talk about viability for your school partners as well. So this should be in beta starting around the end of July or early August. And I do want to save time for our Q&A session, so I'll quickly just touch on the other product that we wanted to showcase here, document ads. This is going to be fully ramped to advertisers on July 20th, and it's the newest member of the sponsored content family. So we have single image, we have carousel units, we have video ads, now we have document ads. The key difference here is you'll be able to upload a PowerPoint, a PDF, or a doc file. So think about using school infographics, program brochures, or case studies that you can, obviously pull directly from your available materials on your website and present them directly within the newsfeed. And this should help drive warmer leads down funnel. This can be positioned, anywhere from an awareness consideration perspective for just getting the word out there about your particular institution, or it can be used from a lead gen perspective. You can actually tease out, a longer brochure, maybe present the first couple of pages, and then present members with a lead gen form to download the document thereafter. So again, stay tuned for that. There are a few, just a couple of examples here, one from the finance vertical and one from education. Again, a lot of real estate to make use of, especially on mobile devices, big bold text. A lot of the materials that we've seen across the vertical could be of good use for the document ad format.
Well, thank you, Richie. Yeah, you can just run the whole animation here, so we can leave a minute or two anyway. Yeah, don't hold back on what makes you special. Take stuff, great stuff from brochures, landing pages, all that. Use that as the kind of to seed your copy. Design for the visual hierarchy, as Richie said, maximize your creative real estate. We didn't talk a lot about lead forms, but try to do the same things we're talking about. Be consistent, show value, talk about what's going to happen after that. Consistent visual language has really proven itself to work really well. These practices, while they may concentrate somewhat on content, can be used across the portfolio. We didn't talk really at all about LinkedIn Live or events. I would encourage you, we also support MIT as a school that we support as well. They are probably the biggest user of live events on the platform. So if you go follow MIT Exec Ed, you can attend some of those events and see how they do it. But I think just overall, the big thing is respect the student decision-making process as much as you can. Try to have a marketing strategy in place that aligns with that and gives people the opportunity to engage at those discrete points in a way that is going to move them further down the funnel to enrollment. And that's everything that we have for you today. So we're happy. I know we answered a couple questions, and there's a few more, I think.
Yeah, we had, as you mentioned, Richie, I know I answered one around the call to actions and recommendations there. The other question that we had in the Q&A area was, from what you know about your demographics, would you consider lead generation on LinkedIn to be better suited for graduate education than undergraduate institutions?
Yes. There's some nuance there. Certainly for non-traditional undergrad, that audience has grown tremendously and is well over 100. I think it's 100 million in the U.S. or something like that. So we're okay. Absolutely seeing that as one of the big areas of growth in terms of marketing on the platform, is in that space. So that's something we're definitely going to be talking more about. For traditional age undergraduate, I would say you were correct. For anything that's picking them up as they leave traditional undergrad through lifelong learning, anything other than that is absolutely a strong suit.
Great. And then we had one coming just now. Is LinkedIn InMail still a thing?
Yes, it is. I can help answer that one. So we did sort of just a rebranding of the InMail product. It's now referred to as sponsored messaging. I myself am still guilty of saying InMail from time to time, but yes, there for the advertising end of things, sponsored messaging, you can send email-like advertisements to prospects directly within their LinkedIn inbox. And that message will stay at the top of their inbox for 30 days without any other advertiser having that real estate. So we've seen, tremendous success from that. Conversation ads operate on that same exact model. The key difference there is the ability to have that kind of decision tree process with the call to action buttons, where prospects can kind of self-select where they're at in the decision process for their educational journey. Great,
thank you. And then another one just came in the Q&A section. How are the doc ads accessible?
So those will be rolled out, like I said, around the 20th of this month, and that will be featured under the same ad formats once you're creating a new campaign. So like I said, regardless of your campaign objective, whether it's brand awareness, engagement, website visits, or lead gen, there'll be a new module to select document ads there. And the key difference there is it'll, when you're at the creative process end of things, when you're creating the ad, instead of uploading an image or a video, you'll have the ability to select a PowerPoint, a PDF, or a document. And you'll have the ability to essentially select how many pages you want to visually showcase within the feed itself.
And also just, I'm sorry for a little bit of clarification, just around accessibility or ADA compliance aspects to the doc ads. Is there anything you'd share there just in terms of how that would factor in? Like alt text, some of those things.
I'm honestly not sure.
Okay.
That's something I can follow up with and send along to you all and to kind of distribute widely. So again, it's been in beta for a bit. I'm sure there are some resources and materials now, or we can follow up directly with the product manager and see if that is an ability with the full rollout.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's one thing I would mention. If there are other questions that come through and whether or that we see that we may have missed in the chat, we'll make sure that we're reconnecting with Tim and Richie and putting together some follow-up content to share out with attendees for anything that we can get answered along those lines as well.
Great. I thank you again. Thank you, Mark. Thank you everyone who participated and attended. It's really appreciate it, and I hope it was helpful, and hope we see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you both. Thank you for joining us. We always appreciate LinkedIn being a part of all the work that we're doing and the content that you're able to share and the insights you're able to provide. So really appreciate you both taking the time to join us here. And just for everyone's FYI, we have one session remaining for the purposes of day 2 of the Connection Conference. It is from our friends at ETS, Smart Recruitment Strategies in Our Evolving World. So that starts at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. And if you're on the schedule page, you should be able to access the Zoom links there and within the calendar additions as well. And then we will also get started tomorrow for day 3, which is a stacked day of sessions and content and expert speakers as well. So we look forward to that. Rounding out the remainder of the week for us. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you, many of you, in the next session. Thanks again, Tim and Richie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care everybody.